Hi, welcome to The Local Flavor, and today we're here at Smokey's down in South Cle Elum, and James is going to show us about cooking some meat here and how to do it well. Could you tell me what we're making now?
Well, we're going to start with appetizers, and so right now we have some sausage from Glondo. This morning I went down and talked to them and asked them for a couple of their sausages. We have their special sausage of the season, which is a turkey cranberry roasted garlic rind sausage, and then we also have a pork sausage that has pork and wine in it, as well as garlic. And so we're going to be making what's called moink balls. That's a bacon-wrapped meatball. The cool thing about moink balls is they're pretty simple to make, and you can get creative with them. I could put capers in these balls. I can put onions. I can put shallots. I can put more garlic. I can, if I want a bigger ball, I can stick breadcrumbs in them. But we're going to just make basic moink balls and try to keep it simple. So we take just a little butter scoop or a small ice cream scoop, and we scoop the ball, packing it in there. We only need that much. We take our hand, we roll it, and we take a piece of bacon and we wrap it with bacon. Take just a regular toothpick and skewer through the top of the bacon, and we set that in there. And then once we get the monk balls made, we're going to go ahead and dust them with your favorite rub. So these I'm going to just dust with Smokey rub, just a light dusting of rub just to give it some extra seasoning. And what happens as these cook, the sausage cooks down, the bacon flavor surrounds the sausage, and then we have the rub. So the blending of those three flavors, these are great for meatball sandwiches. They're great just for appetizers. We're making them for our appetizer course for our holiday meal.
You know, one thing that's interesting in this meat from the sausage from Glondo is the turkey garlic cranberry. You can see the cranberries and the garlic in it. It's pretty intense.
And it smells incredible.
Yeah. Now I've got a question for you on your rub. You guys make your own rub, don't you?
Yeah, we make pretty much everything from scratch here that we use in the restaurant.
And that's pretty impressive. They actually you sell your rub and you sell your barbecue sauce. So they've created their own rub for the meats, and they've created their own barbecue sauce, which are really, really good. It's very special that we have somebody in our little community that not only has a great restaurant, but it's all homemade. So.
Yeah, and we even make our own bacon. So this bacon, we don't sell it. We use this bacon in most of our dishes, like our collards, all of our side dishes that have meat in them. They start with bacon. And this is a really simple recipe to make if you're going to make bacon. You just go to the store. You can even get it from Safeway. They can pre-order it for you. And it's pig belly, rind off. And what I did with this, I bought the brine or the cure from the grocery store, actually in Ellensburg. I think I bought it from Fred Meyer's. And I added to that cure, it's a Morton meat cure, I added brown sugar. So I use a half a cup of cure and 3 cups of brown sugar, and then I took the bacon, I sliced it into sections, and I completely rub it with that cure, and then I set it in a tub for 10 days. It cures. Once that's done, I can either cook it on a smoker, which is what we do, or you can cook it in the oven at a low temperature, very low temperature, 200 degrees, until the meat itself gets about 130 to 140. And you have bacon. You have fresh bacon, better than anything that
homemade
you can
bacon.
make.
Oh my gosh.
Or that you can buy.
Lovers out there, oh my gosh, that's a dream come true to be able to make your own bacon.
It's really easy to make. The hardest thing is really waiting the 10 days as it cures in your refrigerator to cook it up and eat it. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
Now you are especially skilled in the area of barbecue because you've gotten a lot of awards on this one, haven't you?
Yeah, just a couple.
Just a couple.
So we're going to try a different rub. This is a prime rib rub on these over here.
And you just sprinkle it over the top.
Just sprinkle it over the top. You just want, what I like to say is with all the different types of food that we cook, especially competition food, what we're trying to create is layers of flavor, so that when you bite into something, whatever it is, you have an initial flavor that comes off the front of your mouth, and then as the food gets to the back of your palate, you get different layers of flavor, and that's really what creates a bouquet of flavor and a good dish, whatever it is. So you layer your seasonings, you layer your different types of meats, and that layer creates good flavor. So.
And the end result is yum.
Yeah, so that's our moink balls. We're going to stick those in the smoker. They cook about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. The internal temperature, we use a digital probe, and we probe the center of the moink ball. We want the center of the moink ball to be 190, 95 degrees.
Now, did you say these set for a while? Or do these not sit?
These, anything that you apply a rub to, any kind of meat that you apply a rub to, in order for the rub to really, the meat to absorb the rub, especially roast or heavy, dense meats, you want them to set overnight for 24 hours.
Okay.
So I would, if I was prepping this for a holiday meal, I would prep all of this meat the day before I'm going to cook it. Whether I'm going to cook it in the oven or whether I'm going to cook it in the smoker, I'd prep it, stick it in our refrigerator, and then pull it out the day of the cook, and then cook it. So these typically, for me, when we make them for catering jobs, I prep them the day before they go in the walk-in, and I cook them the next morning for that catering
Well,
job.
that's good to know. The whole thing about them absorbing into the meats.
Yeah, the seasoning, you want to give it time, especially the denser the meat, the more time that you want to give it.
Like this would be considered a denser meat.
Right. This is a top round roast that we're going to prep next. And basically this is a beef cut of meat, but with a Christmas roast or any kind of roast, you treat the meat pretty much the same. The denser, the thicker the cut, the denser the meat, the more tender the meat, the less seasoning that you have to give it, put into it. The more denser the meat or the tougher the cut, the more seasoning that you have to give to it in order to get it to be flavorful. But this is just one that I bought from Safeway, just real quick. You could do this with the prime rib roast. You could do this with a leg of lamb roast. You can do it with a pork roast. What we're going to do with this this beef roast. So we have this piece of meat. It's a beef top round roast. Some of the things that you need to, this is actually two different muscles, and you can tell that by the color of the meat. You have this lighter color of the meat, this beef muscle here, and then you have the darker, richer color meat here. This actually is going to be the redder of the muscle. Typically, the more fat striations that you see in the muscle, whether it's beef or pork or any kind of meat, the more tender the muscle is going to be when you cook it. Because the tenderness comes from the fat collagens and the connective tissue between the fat and the muscle breaking down, and that fat saturating the meat, and that's what makes it tender. Whereas this side of the roast, you don't see very much fat striation in it. It's pretty much just meat. So if I had a roast, a cheaper roast that didn't have a lot of fat in it, I would be more inclined to inject it with some meat tenderizer or some type of a marinade and let it sit overnight before I even rub it, and that would tenderize the meat and get more flavor deep inside the meat. This one's pretty tender. A lot of times what I'll do when I pick my meat that I'm going to cook, I'll pick it up actually in the package and I'll poke it and just feel how pliable it is, because the softer, the more pliable the meat, whatever meat it is, the more tender it's going to be. And that's honestly what I want, is I want a tender cut of meat regardless of what I start with. And so the tougher the cut typically means the longer I need to cook it in order to make it tender, to give the heat the opportunity to break down that connective tissue in the meat to make it tender. And most people, the mistake that they make with roast or heavy, dense meats is they don't cook it long enough, or they cook it too quickly. So they'll cook
too quickly, too high.
Too high. They start out too high of a temperature, and so it gets to 130 degrees within an hour or so, and they're like, oh, that's medium rare, so I'm done. Whereas I would cook this at a lower temperature. The more the denser the meat, the cheaper the meat, I would cook it slower, and that gives it time to really break down all of that connective tissue.
For the process to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not
Now, what you're talking about, this would apply to elk meat, deer meat,
any meat.
any meat.
Any meat.
Okay. So basically, everything you're doing here, you could do to your elk meat, to your deer meat, that will help tenderize it and give it good flavor.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to rub this two different ways, just to show you what I would do if this was a piece of lamb or elk, and what I would do if it's a piece of beef. So the first step is to make slits in the meat. And the reason why this meat has a webbing around it, if you see that in the store, what that means is the butcher has put this webbing to keep the meat together. So it's two muscles, they're not completely connected, and so if he didn't put the webbing around this meat, they would fall apart, especially in the cook. So the reason why there's webbing around it is so that it won't fall apart. And you see that a lot with lamb, or with a leg roast that the bone is cut out of the roast. Then they'll put the webbing in there, and don't be intimidated about the webbing. The seasoning will get around it. Everything will be fine. So now that I've got these slivers, what I'm really trying to do is I take these pieces of garlic and I shove them down into the cuts that I made in the meat. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want flavor all the way through this meat. So if I just stick rub on the meat, in that gap there, I'll put a bunch of garlic. If I just put rub on the outside of the meat, then the crust or the bark that's created when it cooks, that would be flavorful. But what I want flavor throughout the meat. So I'm going to stick these pieces of garlic, and I love garlic.
And one thing I found, like with cooking wild game, elk or deer, is that putting the garlic in the meat really takes away that wild game flavor.
Right.
So, it makes it, people who don't like the wild game because of that flavor, putting the garlic in takes that away, cures that.
Yeah, and another way to take that flavor away, or that gamey flavor, is to use a seasoning or a rub that's floral. Like rosemary does it really well. Lavender, we have a lavender rub that we're going to put on this, and that does it really well. So a floral rub, a really effervescent rub for the meat, it does a great job of kind of masking the gaminess of your meat.
I've never heard of using the florals for meat. That's interesting.
All right, so we've got plenty of garlic in here. So the next step is to put it in the pan. And I'm actually going to put 2 layers of flavor on this one. The first one I would do, if it was a prime rib roast, I would just add this. And this is kind of a Montreal seasoning, but it's a prime rib Montreal seasoning. You can buy Montreal seasoning, and if I didn't have this one, I would just use plain Montreal seasoning.
No, what's a Montreal seasoning?
Montreal seasoning comes in Montreal steak seasoning. So grill meats, McCormick makes it. It's a heavy coarse ground pepper, garlic, onion, salt. It's a heavier coarse ground. And so what that does is that creates a nice bark or outer shell when it cooks down on the meat. It gives it great flavor. So this one is pretty much the same thing. So what I like to do with the meat that I'm putting flavor on is I like to say that I'm painting the meat with rub. So I want a coating that is a consistent coating all the way around the rub. I don't want to overpower it, because what happens is, if you bite into the edge of the meat, if it's got way too much, especially if the rub is heavy on the salt side, it'll really affect the flavor. But I want a nice even coat. And so now that you can see some of that garlic sticking out. Now that that's coated, if it was a prime rib roast or one that I'm really trying to emphasize the flavor of the meat, that would be it. Light dusting of rub. I let that sit for 24 hours or overnight. Doesn't have to be exactly 24 hours. And then I'd get my oven ready, or if I was going to cook this in the oven, if it's prime rib, I'd cook it at 300 to 325 degrees, and I would cook to doneness. And doneness for me, especially a beginner cook, you should always cook to temperature. What that means is when the temperature probe, if I probe it in 3 places and it says it's 135 degrees, then that's medium rare, and that's what I want. If that's what I want, 145 degrees is medium. 150 for beef to 155 or more is well done. So I'm going to cook to temperature. I'm not going to cook to time. Sometimes the meat takes longer. Some cuts of meat take longer to get to those temperatures. Some cuts of meat, depending on how much fat is actually in the meat, it cooks quicker. So if you cook to temperature, you're going to always have a meat that's well done.
Nick, I got a question.
Yeah?
My husband likes to take cuts of meat and age them for like about 10 days. Do you still do rubs on an aged piece of meat?
Absolutely. So aging is another way to add flavor and break down the meat to make it more tender. And so there's 2 different ways to age. Most people only has enough room or facility to do one way, which is a wet age. So wet age means that if I have a piece of meat that's cryovac, you really can't wet age in a standard shrink wrap piece of meat that you get from Safeway. But if it's completely cryovac, it means it's sealed from the air. I can leave that piece of meat in a refrigerator for 10 days, all the way up to 45 days in wet aged. And the longer I leave it in there, the more the enzymes inside the meat are going to break down, the more flavor, and it's just going to be really good. In fact, my briskets for competition, if I take a choice brisket, I'll wet age it for 30 to 45 days. Before I even do anything else to the brisket, it sits in the walk-in or the cooler for 30 to 45 days. The other way to age it is to dry age it. And the thing about a dry age is the environment has to be just so. The humidity has to be perfect. It has to be a clean environment. A lot of dry aging happens either at high-end steakhouses or a butcher shop, but you can do wet aging at home as long as the meat is in a cryovac in an airtight bag, or if you buy it from Safeway and you go to Costco and get a cryovac machine, which I highly recommend for anybody that wants to.
That's one of those vacuum
shrink wraps. Yeah. You shrink wrap your meat, rinse it, shrink wrap it, and then wet age it. The juices in the meat will soak out over time, and it'll be perfect. So that's a way to do it.
And then you can put the rub on it after you've done that.
Yes.
Okay.
So this rub here, I don't know if you can see that. This is called Herb de Providence. And what it is it's a rosemary, lavender. It's very floral.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this I would use for leg of lamb, or sometimes for a roast like this, depending on what type of flavor I'm trying to go with, or game, wild game. This is a great rub from that. You can get this from your high-end cooking stores a lot of times, and it doesn't require a lot, but I would just...
It is very, you can definitely smell it.
Right. And
so you layer this on top of the other.
We layer this on top of the other rub, because that's what we like to do with food, is layers of flavor.
Okay.
So I'm just going to rub this just like that. And you can probably tell, if you smell that, it's a completely different flavor.
Oh,
smell.
yeah. Yeah, it's got that's interesting, because it's got kind of a the spicy but floral going on with it. Yeah.
So now we have a piece of beef that has been we stuffed with garlic, that we put a peppery, salty prime rib rub on, and then over the top of that we put a floral herb de Provence, lavender, rosemary rub on. So there's 4 different flavor profiles going on in this piece of meat right here.
That.
All right.
Oh boy.
Okay, next up is our classic ham. So this is a ham shank. Comes from the rear of the pig, the butt basically. Pork butt actually doesn't come from the butt of the pig. Actually, your pork shank comes from the front of the pig. The reason why they call it butt is it's an English term. The ham shank comes from the rear of the pig, a larger shank of meat, and this one has been spiral cut, which is to say that I bought it from Safeway. It comes in a package, and spiral cut just means that it's much easier to trim this later on after I cook it. So this piece of meat has already been smoked, lightly smoked and cooked. So technically all we really need to do is add a little bit more flavor to it and warm it up. Simple to do, but I'm gonna not only add a little bit more flavor, but I'm going to add flavor in the cooking process because I'm going to re-smoke this. So when we're done, this piece of ham is going to be a double smoked peach honey glazed ham. So the flavor is in the doubling of the smoking and then the glaze that I'm going to use over the top of this.
Now I got a question for you. You said this is already cooked now. I'm assuming that people who are not accustomed with, using this kind of meat might overcook it.
Yeah, especially a ham like this. The tendency is to want to overcook it. And so, to safe cook it, all I need to do is reheat this ham to 165 degrees. Anything above 140, the bacteria that may have been in this ham will kill it, but safe is 165 degrees. Any more than that, I'm starting to cook the cooking process all over again, and I really don't want to do that because the more I cook it after that point, the drier that the ham's going to be. So some things that I would do with this ham to keep it moist is, one, I would put apple juice in the pan. So I put about a ½ inch of apple juice, or white grape peach is really good to use. That's what we're going to use in this pan. And then I would also saran wrap it and aluminum foil wrap it, and that locks the moisture into the pan. So all of the moisture stays in the ham. And I'm not going to worry about what the bark or the outside of it looks like because I'm going to take care of that after I get it warmed up. I pull it back out. That's when I put my glaze on the piece of ham, and then I cook it at a higher temperature just to set the bark to get the glaze nice and glistening.
And how long would you say that would be?
Glaze is about 15 to 20 minutes to get it, glazed. It should take about an hour, depending on the size of the ham, about an hour to 2 hours at lower temperature to heat it up.
So what you're saying is that when you first get it, you have the lower temperature of, like, say 165 for about an hour to 2 hours?
No, the 165 is what I want the internal temperature to be.
Okay.
But I would cook this. I'm going to cook this ham at 275 degrees.
Oh, okay.
To start with, and then I would glaze it at about 325. So I started at a lower temperature, 275, for about an hour to 2 hours. I probe it, in the area that I want to make sure that the temperature is where I want it. So pretty much all I'm going to do is just rub it right now. So I take our all-purpose rub. This is a barbecue rub, but it's really good on pork. Has a great flavor for pork.
And this is a rub you guys make?
Yep, this is a rub we make. We use it in we use it for our pork, our chicken, all of them. So if you don't want, this has cumin in it and chili powder. Maybe you don't want that flavor on your ham. Then you can use, if you want to make your own rub, just a basic rub, I would use brown sugar, garlic, onion powder, salt, and a little bit of pepper for pork. Blend that all together, and that makes a great pork rub. And it doesn't have any barbecue essence to it. It's just got a good pork flavor. We're going to go ahead and put some white grape peach juice in the bottom of this pan. Not too much. I just want to put a little bit in there, and that's just to keep moisture, to lock moisture in. Now, if I'm cooking this on the smoker, I wouldn't start out this way. I would start out by setting on a smoker for an hour or two to get some double smoke in there. Or actually, I could start out this way but leave the pan open like this. Stick it right on the smoker, just like that. Leave that white grape peach in there and let the smoke absorb into the meat. The thing about smoked meat, the meat's not going to absorb any more smoke after 3 to 4 hours. So if I'm cooking a meat that's starting from raw, I would cook it, 8 hours, but after 4 hours, I could wrap that to speed up the cooking process, even at a lower temperature. This one, we're not going to cook it so long, so for the first hour, I'm going to leave it open like this, and the second hour, I'm going to go ahead and close it. And what I would do to close it is I just wrap it with saran wrap. And you can do this in your regular oven. The thing about saran wrap, you can use it in the oven if you protect it with another layer. If I would just put this like this, the saran wrap has a tendency wherever it touches the metal would melt. But if I go ahead and wrap it, again, then we're good. So after that first hour on the smoker, or before I stick it in the oven, I would wrap it like this. I want to take a mental note of where I'm going to probe it. So I'm going to be probing right here to test the doneness, because I want to probe in the thickest part of the meat, and that's this rump part here. So I'm going to probe there later on when I want. But that's ready for the oven. I want to talk about sauces. The meat's on the smoker, getting ready. So the next step is to prep for when it's done, and the glazing process. And so I've got 2 different sauces. What I like to do is I'll go shopping at Costco or the grocery store. I'll look in the sauce section and I'll grab sauces sometimes that I think, oh wow, that would make a great coating for me. So this one here, got it at Costco. It's a peach, mango, orange preserve, basically, fruit spread. And so I'm going to make a sauce out of this. I'm going to glaze the ham with this, and I'm also going to add some more liquid to it and make it the sauce, a finishing sauce that we use on the ham. And this other one is a cranberry pomegranate jalapeno sauce. So this one is a little bit spicier, great for beef cuts or wild cuts. So this is a sauce that I'm going to use for the beef. Now I could make these sauces from scratch, but why? I mean, if you can find one in the store that you think is, wow, I'd love to put that on a piece of meat, then buy it and try it out. It's a shortcut to good cooking. So we don't have to create everything from scratch. This sauce here, we can make both of them from scratch, but we're going to use these to start with, and then we're going to add to them. For the beef roast, we did a prime rib Montreal seasoning rub, and then we rubbed it a second time with the floral herb de Providence. It has lavender, rosemary, marjoram, a bunch of different herbs, and that gives it that floral-y flavor profile that we were looking for. The moink balls, we went down to Glando's and got some sausage, kind of played around with different flavors. We have a cranberry turkey sausage that's a special next week for the holidays, and we also got their red wine pork sausage, and we made some moink balls for these great little appetizers. Make a second day great sandwich, meatball sandwich, if you wanted to go that direction.
So we have our pork, we have our sausage, and we have our beef. So you have your choice of what you want to eat here. But one thing I really like about what you did is you put your rubs on it, the rubs that you make on it, that give it a really unique flavor. And then this one here that's got It's got quite the crust on it, but oh, is that good? It really hits you. These flavors really hit you, and the whole thing that you talked about, the layering, and understanding that you're not just eating food, but when you taste it, you can taste all the little different things that
Right.
go into it. You know what you've shown here is that it is very simple to step up your meals by just adding simple things to it, like a rub or like a simple glaze. I mean, just the what was it, that jalapeno
Yeah, that's
cranberry pomegranate jalapeno sauce.
Yep, that's
Yeah, with some wine, and it makes a great glaze. I'd never even thought about using that like that.
Yeah, and then I got this from Costco. So, and I could have made that from scratch. It would have taken us a lot longer, and you might get lost in the translation. So this is a easier version of one. It, it doesn't have the finer nuances as a sauce that you would make from scratch, but all in all, it's a good.
You know what? For most of our viewers, this is the style of cooking that they do.
Exactly.
They're nice and easy, but healthy and cost effective. That's kind of what we try to promote, is how to cook cost effectively for people. And it's an inexpensive cut of meat. You just made it beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a simple thing to do. So anyway, folks, you can easily make outstanding meals at an inexpensive price and impress everybody, and they won't even know the difference. They think you slaved all day. Right?
Right.
Well, thank you, James. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, and this is James from Smokey's down here in South Cle Elum. So if you ever get a chance, come in and check out his place. He does have the once a month murder mystery theaters, which aren't. I've been to them. They're kind of like playing Clue, the game Clue, but you're actually doing it. So it's a really cool place. He's got great food, and he's just proven how well he can cook. So anyway, this has been The Local Flavor. I am so happy to be here with James. And
Thanks for coming.
Yes. And if you want to come on The Local Flavor, give us a call, and we'll set you up, and we'll see what you can cook. But until next time, stay healthy. Keep cooking. Bye-bye.